The smell of coffee and fried bacon lingered in the air of the small-town diner. It was one of those quiet afternoons when even the ceiling fan seemed lazy, turning just enough to keep the silence moving. A few regulars sat by the windows, sipping coffee and talking about nothing that mattered. The jukebox in the corner played a soft old tune, the kind that belonged to a slower time. Everything felt still until the door suddenly slammed open. A boy no older than 7 stumbled inside. Panting hard, his face red from crying, his hair was messy, his shirt half untucked, and his small hands trembled as he gripped the doorframe. Everyone froze. Forks stopped mid-air. Conversations died mid. Even the jukebox seemed to fade out. The boy's voice cracked as he cried. "He hit my grandma." Gasps rippled through the room. The cook behind the counter lowered his spatula. A waitress whispered, "Oh my lord." But before anyone could react, a heavy chair scraped against the floor. At the far end of the diner, 4 men in leather jackets looked up. Their jackets were marked with a logo that read Iron Souls MC. They were bikers, rough-looking to most, but calm, collected, and known in the town for keeping to themselves. Their leader, Colt, was a tall man with a gray streak through his beard and eyes that could cut through a lie. He studied the boy quietly for a few seconds, then stood up, towering over the tables. The room seemed smaller when he moved. "Where's your grandma, kid?" he asked, his tone steady but laced with something protective. The boy sniffled, pointing shakily toward the alley across the street. He pushed her down. "He's yelling at her." His voice trembled, full of helpless anger. Colt's jaw clenched. The other bikers, Jocks, Rooster, and Bear, exchanged looks without saying a word. They knew that tone in Colt's voice, the one that meant someone had crossed a line. No one else in the diner moved. The regulars looked nervous, unsure if stepping in would help or make things worse. But Colt didn't hesitate. He tossed a few bills on the table, signaling his crew. "Come on, boys," he said quietly, the kind of quiet that carried more weight than a shout. As they walked past, the boy tugged at Colt's vest. "Please, mister, she's old. He's gonna hurt her again." Colt bent down just enough to meet the boy's tearful eyes. "Not while we're around," he said, his voice low and sure. Outside, the engines of their motorcycles still ticked with leftover heat. The wind picked up dust as they crossed the road, following the boy's tiny footsteps toward the alley. The peaceful afternoon had turned into something else entirely, a moment where kindness wore black leather, and justice had the sound of boots echoing on concrete. Somewhere behind the counter, the waitress whispered under her breath, "Pure hub, kindness. I wish the world had more men like that." The alley behind the diner was narrow and dimly lit, the kind of place most people avoided after dark. A stack of old cardboard boxes leaned against a wall, and the faint smell of trash mixed with the evening air. The boy led the bikers down the cracked pavement, his little shoes slapping hurriedly as he ran ahead. "She's right there," he cried, pointing to the far end of the alley. Colt's eyes followed the boy's hand and his chest tightened. An elderly woman sat slumped against the brick wall, her silver hair tangled and her thin arm wrapped around her ribs. Standing over her was a tall man in a faded jacket, yelling something cruel and slurred. The way he wobbled on his feet told Colt everything he needed to know. The man had been drinking. "You think you can talk back to me?" the drunk shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. "Next time, I'll make sure you stay down." He raised his hand again, but the sound of heavy boots stopped him mid-motion. The 4 bikers stepped into the alley, like shadows made of iron and thunder. Colt led the way, his leather jacket reflecting the last light of sunset. "That hurt?" he asked softly over his shoulder. The boy nodded, clutching his fists so tightly his knuckles went white. The man turned around, startled, his expression shifting from anger to sudden fear. "Hey, this ain't your business," he snapped, trying to sound confident but failing miserably. Jocks, the tallest of the crew, folded his arms, a smirk forming beneath his beard. "You sure about that, pal? Looks to me like you just made it our business." The drunk took a step back, eyes darting between them. He tried to puff himself up, to look tough, but next to the bikers, he looked like a bully caught red-handed. Colt's tone stayed calm, almost quiet. "Put your hands down and step away from her." The man hesitated. "Chi-Chi started it. She ran into me." Rooster, the youngest of the crew, laughed once. "She started it. She's 70, man. What did she do, outsprint you?" Even the boy, through his tears, gave a tiny, broken laugh. The tension cracked just long enough for Colt to step closer. "You listen to me," Colt said, his voice low but steady. "You hit her again, and I swear, you'll wish the police were the ones coming for you." The man blinked, realizing these weren't ordinary bystanders. These were men who didn't bluff. He lowered his hand, muttering something under his breath. Colt knelt beside the elderly woman. "Ma'am, you okay?" Her eyes fluttered open, still dazed. "I just wanted to go home," she whispered. Colt nodded, helping her sit up carefully. "You will," he promised. "We got you." Behind him, Bear dialed 911, reporting the assault while keeping his eyes fixed on the man. The boy wrapped his tiny arms around his grandma, whispering, "It's okay now." For the first time that evening, the alley grew quiet, not from fear, but from the powerful calm that follows when kindness takes a stand. Colt crouched beside the elderly woman, the roughness of his leather jacket brushing lightly against her trembling arm. Her breathing was shallow, and the bruise forming near her elbow was already darkening. "Ma'am," he said softly, his deep voice gentle in contrast to his intimidating frame. "You're safe now. We're here." Her eyes lifted slowly, cloudy with pain, but full of gratitude. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she whispered. "He just got angry when I didn't move fast enough. Said I was blocking his way." Her words trembled like her hands. Colt shook his head. "You didn't cause this," he said firmly. "He did?" He turned to Jocks, who had stepped between the drunk and the boy, acting like a wall made of steel. "Keep him there," Colt ordered quietly. Jocks nodded, cracking his knuckles as a warning. The man, red-faced and sweating, tried to speak. "You don't know what happened." "She don't," Colt interrupted. His voice was calm, but it sliced through the air like a blade. "You put your hands on someone who couldn't fight back. There's nothing else I need to know." Rooster crouched beside the boy. "You did good, kid," he said, patting his shoulder. "You came for help. That's brave." The boy looked up, eyes wide and glassy. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do," he confessed. "She just fell, and he kept yelling." Rooster smiled, trying to lighten his voice. "You did the right thing. You're a hero tonight." The boy's small fingers wrapped around his grandmother's, holding her like he'd never let go again. She smiled faintly, whispering, "My sweet boy." Colt stood and turned his attention back to the man, whose confidence was quickly draining away. "You think it makes you strong to hurt people weaker than you?" Colt asked. The man swallowed hard but said nothing. Colt took a slow step forward. "I've seen real strength," he continued. "It's standing up for someone who can't stand on their own. You're just a coward hiding behind anger." The man's eyes darted toward the mouth of the alley, looking for a way out, but Jocks blocked his escape. "Stay right there," Jocks growled. "You're not going anywhere until the cops get here." Bear returned from the street and gave Colt a nod. "Ambulance on the way. They'll be here in 5. Colt exhaled, running a hand through his hair. The tension that had gripped the alley slowly began to ease. The old woman tried to rise, but Colt gently helped her back down. "Don't push it, ma'am. Let the medics handle it." "Thank you," she whispered. People walked by. Nobody stopped. Her eyes glistened with tears. "But you did." Colt looked at her, then at his crew. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "we don't ride past someone in need. That's not who we are." The boy looked up at him, his small voice steady for the first time. "Are you superheroes?" Colt smiled faintly. "Nah, kid. Just people trying to make the world a little less mean." The alley had grown quieter, but tension still lingered like smoke. The drunk man leaned against the wall, trying to steady himself, his hands trembling as the bikers surrounded him. His face was pale now, no longer angry, just scared. The bluster had drained out of him completely. Colt stood in front of him, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to pin the man in place. "You've got two choices," Colt said evenly. "You can make this right the right way, or the hard way." The man blinked, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to hurt her." Colt's eyes narrowed. "You did hurt her. You don't get to talk your way out of that, but you can start fixing it by doing one thing right now." He pointed toward the elderly woman, who was sitting on a crate with the boy's arm around her shoulders. Her wrinkled face was streaked with dried tears. But she looked stronger now. Maybe because she knew she wasn't alone anymore. Colt's tone softened slightly, but carried the same weight. "You're going to apologize to her, and you're going to call for help. Then you're going to wait here until the police show up. Understand?" The man hesitated, his pride battling with fear. His eyes flicked between the biker's Jocks, arms crossed like a stone pillar. Bear, built like a wall. And Rooster, fiddling with his gloves like he was itching for a reason to act. Colt didn't have to raise his voice. The silence around him did the work. The man finally nodded. I'm sorry, ma'am," he stammered, his voice cracking. "I shouldn't have done that. I was mad. I stopped." Colt interrupted. "Don't make excuses. Just say you're sorry." The man swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." The woman looked at him, pain in her eyes, but also pity. "You can't take anger out on others," she said softly. "It only makes the world colder." Her voice, though frail, carried more wisdom than all his excuses. Behind them, faint blue and red lights began to flicker at the end of the alley. The sirens grew louder, a sound of accountability on its way. Colt stepped back as the police car pulled up. "You stay right here," he said to the man. "You move before they come, and I promise you'll regret it." The man nodded again, defeated. When the officers approached, Colt explained what happened. No drama, no embellishment, just the truth. They thanked him and began questioning the man. Meanwhile, the paramedics gently helped the old woman onto a stretcher. The boy refused to let go of her hand until they assured him he could ride with her. As the ambulance doors closed, the little boy looked at Colt. "You saved my grandma," he said, his small voice filled with awe. Colt gave a small, reassuring smile. "Nah, kid, you did that. You ran in and got help. You're the real hero here." The engines of the bikes rumbled softly as the crew turned to leave. The bystanders who had gathered at the end of the alley watched them, recording on their phones as the headlights lit up the street. That night, the video spread fast, for bikers standing up for an old woman, walking away without seeking praise. The caption read, The night air carried a soft chill as the flashing police lights faded into the distance. The alley was quiet again, the tension replaced by a strange, almost peaceful calm. The boy stood at the curb, clutching the stuffed bear the paramedics had given him, watching the ambulance disappear down the road. His eyes were red from crying, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was relief. Colt adjusted his gloves, the leather creaking softly as he turned toward the boy. "She'd be okay," he said, his voice steady and low. "They'll take her to the hospital. Fix that arm up, good as new." The boy nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Thank you, all of you," he whispered. Nobody else came. People just watched. Colt crouched down to meet his eyes. "A lot of folks watch," he said gently, "but not many step up. You did, kid. You didn't just stand there, you ran for help. That takes guts." The boy looked down shyly. "I thought you might be scary, but you're not." Colt chuckled, a rare sound that softened his rough features. "We might look scary," he said, glancing back at his crew, "but we're not the bad guys. Sometimes, the ones people are afraid of are the ones who'll protect you the hardest." Rooster ruffled the boy's hair. "Remember that, little man. Don't judge a heart by its jacket." The bikers walked with him toward the diner, where it all began. The street was nearly empty now, lit by flickering neon signs and the faint hum of the town settling down for the night. The waitress who had watched everything stood at the door, her hands clasped together. "You men did something good tonight," she said softly. "There's still kindness left in this world." Colt gave a half smile. "Kindness isn't gone," he replied. "It just doesn't shout as loud as cruelty." The boy tugged at his vest. "Will I see you again?" Colt looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe, but you don't need us anymore. You've already got what matters. Courage." He placed a small metal token in the boy's palm. It was an old biker coin, worn from years of rides, engraved with the words, "Ride with honor." "Keep this," Colt said. "It'll remind you that doing the right thing doesn't need a reason, just heart." The boy nodded solemnly, holding the coin tightly. "I'll never forget you." The bikers walked to their motorcycles, engines rumbling like thunder rolling through the quiet streets. As they rode off into the horizon, the red taillights shimmered like embers fading into the night. The waitress watched from the doorway, whispering to herself, "Pure hub kindness. That's what the world needs more of." The next morning, a local video went viral, the footage of the four bikers standing up for a grandmother and her brave grandson. Millions watched it, many wiping tears from their eyes. The headline read, "They wore leather, rode steel, and carried kindness in their hearts. Pure hub kindness." And somewhere, that little boy sat by his grandma's bedside, clutching the coin and smiling, knowing that real heroes don't need capes, just courage, compassion, and the will to do what's right.